Hello, welcome back to the Action Factory podcast, and it feels absolutely amazing to be back. And I don't even just mean being, back doing the podcast, so that's amazing, but it's just being back at the desk, being back in normal life, being back at work and developing and doing what I love doing. Because you may have noticed that I've not been around for a while, and never in my wildest dreams did I imagine what moving house could involve. I promise you, I am never, ever doing it again. It has been pretty epic. If you're new around here, my name is Michael Dawson from the Action Factory, and I'm the creator of the Solutions Toolkit. It's a principle-based, universal framework for youth work teams. So if you're interested in a more consistent approach from your team, a team that's more confident in crisis, better outcomes, then do check out my website at theactionfactory.com, where you can watch my free webinar. Links, as usual, around this podcast. The development of the Solutions Toolkit took several years, and I needed to overcome a lot of challenges. But what I noticed that in talking about these challenges, I'm often asked how I came about and what was my experience, where did all that come from? And you'll often hear me say how lucky I was to, apart from everything else, to have three defining job roles that were probably quite revolutionary. I want to talk about one of them today, and I'll probably talk about the others in the coming weeks, because I've never really gone into any detail about them. But I think I should, not least because I feel there are some really deep lessons in there for you as a youth worker, and more importantly, if you're a person of influence. I'm not talking about an internet influencer doing little dances and things like that. I'm talking about a person of influence, perhaps in a city council, or someone who, really would want to save your local authority a few million quid. I'm not even joking on this. This week, I want to talk about what was called at the time FIT. It's not anymore. It's since been kind of watered down tremendously. But I want to talk about this original idea concept, because I was a founder member of the team in Manchester. By this, I mean we literally painted the walls, put down the carpets, filled the vases, because we had vases with flowers in. I'll tell you more about that. While this was happening, we were training in the solution-focused approach to be ready to work with families. So we were not only the gatekeepers to the care system, but we had the skills to help families to push on and get better. One of my private jokes at the time was that if we were in private industry, we would have been earning hundreds of thousands a year driving a Mercedes. Now, why do I say that? Well, I've looked at recent figures that say a foster child can cost £30,000 to the local authority, and I'm hearing numbers up to £250,000, maybe more, depending on what the child's needs are, a year. And local authorities in the UK spent around £4.5 billion in 2021. So we as a service, the FIT, literally kept hundreds of young people out of the system. And I'm going to tell you how we did that very, very shortly. Even despite what we did in those 10 years, just for Manchester City Council, in 2022, there were 82,000 kids looked after by local authorities, 28% increase. So you do the maths there, despite our best efforts, and we did very, very well at what we did. I'm going to explain that to you shortly. The increase was still there. So let's put the money to one side and let's pretend that the local authority don't really mind much about the money. They don't care. They care more about kids. Well, we all do. Look at some of these numbers. Only 14% of children in care get 5 good GCSEs. I was in care. I don't think I got 5 good GCSEs. I got most of my education after school. Now, 58% of non-care kids actually get around about 5 good GCSEs. 45% of children in care have a diagnosed mental health disorder, compared to about 10% in the general population. 25% of homeless adults have previously been in care at some point. Over 50% of children in youth custody have been in care at some point, and only around 50% of care leavers are in employment, education or training, compared to 85% of all young people. So the list goes on, and I'm not going to sit here spewing those numbers because you probably heard them all. What we can gather from all that is it might follow that kids who stay at home have much better life chances, and the cost savings to the city councils are off the scale. Hence the idea that when we add it all up, we should have all been driving Mercedes and earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. Let me tell you a little bit about it. I went for an interview with the city council to apply for a job as a residential worker. I had a job at the time. I was in a family unit, and they knew I wanted to move. I was in a family unit. I wanted to move to a bigger unit. I wanted to expand my experience in that particular sector. I was in the interview and I was chatting about the background and stuff, and then just something amazing happened. Looking back now, it is amazing because the interviewer described for me a service they were setting up, and it was designed to keep kids out of the care system and keep them at home. And it was going to use family therapy and a thing called the solution-focused brief therapy. I was asked, probably with a wink, should the opportunity arise, would you be interested in this rather than the job you've come and applied for? I was blown away by this. I was so excited. I stayed cool. I don't know why I stayed cool. I just didn't want to get too excited. I said, yeah, this sounds amazing. So I went home and I waited, and I was praying that they would offer me this opportunity to do this job. I had so many personal reasons to want to do it, but also it sounded awesome. So I wanted it more than anything. Well, eventually I received a phone call. They offered me a position on this new team. It was going to be called the Family Intervention Team. We were going to work out a set of empty rooms on the back end of a residential unit. Now, the very first time I met my fellow team member on that day was the day we went to view the unit. There was nothing there. No reception, no furniture or carpets, no phones. It was going to be us that would pull this place together. And it's worth saying we did have a really generous budget to do all it. And I was probably a good asset because, I'm quite handy. I was an ex-electrician. There was 8 of us at the time, and it was a great, great time. The format was we'd train about 1 or 2 days a week, and the other 3 days would be spent effectively pulling this place together with no professional help. And I'm pretty sure that the whole idea was probably ownership. And if it was, it worked really, really well. I loved the training because I was absolutely fascinated by this new model we were being taught. And I loved the physical aspect of actually building our service ourselves. I mean, just to jump ahead for a minute, I remember sitting in the office one day. I remember saying, in years to come, I think we'll all say this is the best job we ever had. And no one disagreed with me. And I still believe it now. Not only were we all so excited about what we were doing, but we were learning about this amazing solution-focused model. The ethos and the ideas behind it kind of seeped into us all. The positivity about being upbeat. And I felt like we were such a tight-knit group. And everyone agreed with me. And I think if we spoke now, they'd all agree it was probably one of the best jobs any of us have ever had. Finally, we were ready to launch, and we'd done all the curtains, put all the curtains up. God, it was beautiful. And we invited all the services and social workers to come and see what we'd done, because they would be the ones referring clients to us. And it was unlike anything you'd expect from a city council or a social service. As a kid, I grew up visiting social services offices to see my social work. The reception smelled of cigarettes, and it had dimps all over the floor. People smoked indoors there. They had those low PVC chairs that would explode, and all the foam would come out. Those hospital plastic floors, and we got to peek through a tiny glass window and wait. You were basically treated like lower class and unclean, but not in the family intervention team. Everyone was absolutely blown away by the standards we set. It really was gorgeous. And we designed it and built it. We had a huge art and playroom with characters on the walls, all the facilities we needed. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was well furnished. There was therapy and meeting rooms. Each one had a nickname. People had the favourites, and you booked them out. And booking out the green room, booking out the blue room. We had our favourite rooms, lovely brand new settees, plants. In fact, one day I was due to see a family, and I came down to find them in the hallway. And I asked, why didn't you wait in the waiting room. It's more comfortable and it's warm, it's well decorated. And the mother said, I didn't think we were allowed. They didn't believe that they were able to use the waiting room. As policy, we welcomed people like you would at home. Remember, this is a city council service. And if you brought a friend home and your mum passed you, would you introduce them? Because that's what we did. Hi, Karen. Oh, this is Mr. and Mrs. Jones and Timmy and Brian. And Karen would say, oh, hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name's Karen. I work with Michael on the team. And she'd go off up the corridor and she'd say, have a good session, or she'd make some joke. Even as families arrived, they'd be offered hot drinks. And sometimes in the hot weather, they'd get little ice lollies for the kids. Eventually, we signed up our first client, first referral, and I said, I'm having it. And I won that argument. I must admit, we were a little bit nervous at first, but I won that argument. I said, I'm having the first client, and I couldn't wait to go in and try out this solution-focused therapy stuff. And even our attitude to the work was very different. So imagine the scenario. The mother isn't coping with the kid's behaviour, and she goes to social services. She says, look, you need to take this kid off me. I can't cope. And they say, well, we don't do that now. You have to go to family intervention. They'd come to us. And you can imagine what they expect. They were coming to me for a lecture on how they should behave. You better behave because we'll take you into care if you don't be good. And all this This was absolutely not the case. Instead, we'd use solution-focused brief therapy and we'd hear the issues. We'd use the tools that we had to help this family come to a solution. We were willing to listen to them together, separately, not to find out what should be done, but for them to be heard and to help them find their solutions, which was the awesome power of the solution-focused approach. I can tell you so many stories, but here's an example. And if you know anything about a solution-focused approach, then you'll know about the miracle question. Obviously, we're not here to talk about this particular method. There's loads of stuff on my website. At some point you ask a miracle question, and it's something like, let's just say you leave this room and you go home tonight and you go to bed and all the reasons why you are here just disappear. But you wouldn't know that because you were asleep. So as you go through your day tomorrow, what's going to tell you things have changed? I know this sounds very weird and out of context and stupid, but I can tell you in practice, it was so powerful. Just this one thing. You'd expect people might say, I've won the lottery, wouldn't I? Or all that kind of thing. But it simply never happened in my experience. People took this question in context. And what was also amazing to me was how simple the things were that they wanted. I remember once I asked this question to a guy in front of his wife and his daughter. He said, I'd come down in the morning, my daughter would be happy, cheerful, ready for school. She'd kiss me on the cheek, say good morning, Dad. And so by now I can see his eyes have kind of glazed over. And he's in the moment. He's hypnotized. I glanced at his wife and daughter. I could just see him. The jaws had dropped. It was like someone had taken over it. They were both flabbergasted. He carried on, she'd chat to me and finish breakfast, put a plate in the sink, say goodbye, Dad, and head to school. This was one of so many memorable and powerful occasions because I think for the first time, his family could see that what he wanted wasn't some outlandish dream, but just what every father wants. Love and respect, some very basic things. Just his family to be happy. Needless to say, this was one of many, many families that we did some amazing work with. But, we weren't here to talk about the method itself as such, in the hope that I can offer some clues as to why we were so successful at what we did. We went through our files and our figures. I remember being almost embarrassed. We were conservatively showing 85% success rates and satisfaction with clients. And I say embarrassed because it almost looked like it was made up. It was so good. And I say that those figures were unbelievable. The success we had in those days with keeping young people out of care. And I stress that just in case you happen to be ahead of a city council. Another thing to note is the lack of failures. A failure, or at least it felt like a failure, was when kids did end up in the system. Mainly this was out of our hands because, this had only happened if there was a clear risk to the young person or others or there was clear abuse of some kind. And this was never our call, but it was amazing how few times this was actually the case. The other thing was with solution-focused speech therapy, they would be told at the beginning, usually we'll see people for up to 6 weeks, how we hardly ever needed more than 6 sessions to do our work. And this was because we were constantly standing our clients, standing them up and letting them go. And our core belief was that an okay family dynamic is way better than not. No family's perfect, and that was an expectation that was way, way too high, for most of us. One of the other things we also did in the service was extra activities. My speciality was parenting courses. This was also something I absolutely loved, and the reason is because a lot of the kids that we were working with were very risky, violent, and extreme. So teaching a parenting group like this was a fantastic experience, and seeing the success of these parents was an incredible experience. And I may talk about parenting in the coming weeks. I was planning a thing called kind of Parenting 101, which is really, really basic attitude to parenting, whether that's corporate or everyday. That was the service as it was. And I was a devout solution-focused therapist. I refused to do any wavering. I was completely sold on this idea and how powerful it was. And the wavering kind of included slipping into making judgments about people, offering instructions or guidance. And if you don't know about solution-focused work, I would suggest you look it up. This went against the ethos of what we did. So instead, I kind of dove deeper. I read books. I soaked up everything about this model and followed the trail backwards in time, reading books by Virginia Satir and people like that, until I suppose my time actually came. I was always the first to put my hand up to talk about our service and do presentations to groups and stuff like that. And it was natural that in the end I'd start my own training consultancy and work with training others in the solution-focused model. And so I did start my own. And another reason I moved on, which is, as I was really doubling down on this knowledge, we were having staff turnover, and this watered down our model and the way we worked. So new team members were being trained on the job, and so they would really easily fall back on their own experience. Instead of the results we were getting, it just didn't feel the same. Metaphorically, it's as if we were morphing into a city council service with a city council attitude, and our reception chairs were kind of getting old. And to carry the metaphor a bit more, the fluff was starting to come out of our chairs. In fact, this is a key concept in my own training course now, the Solutions Toolkit. I developed it in a way that new members of staff can have access to the very same training as everyone else. And it also offers lifetime membership so that it can be revisited at any time. And had we had that option, then maybe that service that we created would still exist in its present form. And I know we still probably wouldn't have our Mercedes, but I don't know, maybe the head of the city council could afford one. I don't know, but we would have been keeping a lot of kids out of care. And after all, kids in care are bloody expensive. And I only wish we could resurrect that whole idea. So, heads of council, call me, get your brownie badge for setting this thing up, get that Mercedes. Yeah, it would be wonderful. It would be so joyous to have this kind of service. All I can say now, I suppose, is similar to what I always say, hundreds of kids who stayed out of care because of that service probably got families of their own now. And one thing's for sure, their life chances massively increased. And I'm sure they've got families that are not perfect, and that's fine. But I'm really proud of what we did. I can say that, without a doubt, it probably is true that it was the best job I ever had. And that's saying something because, as you may find out, I have been so lucky in my career to do these revolutionary projects. I wanted to tell you about another one in a couple of weeks that I think you're going to find massively interesting. It's the one where I talk about being like the undercover mental health worker. An incredible, incredible period in my life. That's it, really. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being there. I'm really sorry I've let you down by moving house. and not showing up. But please peruse our earlier podcasts. There's some great PDF downloads and tools. And remember to watch my free webinar, which is linkable around here somewhere. It's called The Big Four and Why They Matter in Youth Work. And it's all about the key components of 4 key skills in youth work. And I would say, provocatively, probably all that you need. And if you fancy a bit of fun after all that, then why not try clicking the Simpsons link that I'm going to put around here somewhere? Because for some reason, the Simpsons have a way of kind of hitting the spot in a comedic fashion. So that's a bit of fun as well. So thank you for being there. I have been Michael Dawson, and this has been the Action Factory podcast. I'm going to be back in a couple of weeks, and you can listen or find out more at www.theactionfactory.com. That's www.theactionfactory.com. See you next week.